Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. We're the place you come to cut through all that noise and get the insights that really matter, straight to you.
That's right. And today, it's quite the mix we're looking at, a real juxtaposition, actually.
Yeah, definitely. On one side, you've got these intense geopolitical situations escalating, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, power shifts, humanitarian crises. It's heavy stuff.
It really is. But then, almost in the same breath, you see these, frankly, astonishing breakthroughs, human biology, AI, things that are fundamentally changing how we understand life and, well, everything.
It's a paradox, isn't it? This capacity for conflict right alongside this incredible drive for knowledge and progress.
Precisely. So our mission today, as always, is to distill the key takeaways from, well, a whole heap of global sources, articles, research, our notes, and give you that shortcut to being genuinely informed.
Think of it as your curated tour of the world right now. We'll unpack the big picture, dig into some fascinating details, maybe find a few surprising facts, and hopefully keep it engaging along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll journey through the global power dynamics, delve into science, face up to climate change realities, and even check out some intriguing social trends.
So, yeah, let's dive deep. Okay, first stop, that global chessboard. And we have to start in the Middle East. It's rarely quiet there, and tensions are incredibly high right now. We're seeing big military moves alongside attempts at diplomacy.
Indeed. A really significant development is Israel's Operation Black Flag. It targeted key Houthi infrastructure over in Yemen, which sits there on the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula.
And this was direct retaliation, right, for Houthi drone and missile attacks?
That's the stated reason, yes. Reports from outlets like RT and the BBC confirm that. And when we say key infrastructure, we mean major assets.
Like ports. Hodeidah, Ras Isa, Al Salif, those are vital Red Sea ports.
Exactly. Those ports plus the Ras Katib power station. The scale suggests this was, well, a substantial operation, not just a minor strike.
Okay. And the justification from the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF?
They claim the Houthis repurposed these sites for military use. Things like transferring Iranian weapons, running surveillance operations. The Telegraph and CNN mentioned specifically the targeting of a commercial ship, the Galaxy Leader. The IDF alleges the Houthis fitted it with radar to monitor Red Sea traffic, a direct threat to shipping.
So it's about neutralizing perceived threats, not just retaliation, both to Israel and, crucially, international shipping in that key lane.
Precisely. Defense Minister Israel Katz called the power station a legitimate target, arguing it powered Houthi military operations. He framed the Houthis as a central Iranian proxy, vowing continued responses.
And he even likened Yemen's treatment to Iran's. That sounds like a broader regional strategy.
It certainly suggests that. And what's really key here, this is one of Israel's most significant military actions in Yemen. It reflects that broader stance against perceived Iranian proxies.
But wait, weren't there ceasefire agreements between Israel and Iran recently?
Yes, and that's the complex part. This major escalation is happening despite those agreements. It suggests that while the main players might agree to a pause, proxy forces can still be used to apply pressure, making real de-escalation incredibly difficult. It's that gray zone conflict persisting.
Right. And at the very same time these strikes were happening, ceasefire talks were starting in Qatar, the ones between Hamas and Israel.
That's correct. Talks began in Qatar, a key diplomat player in the region, but the first session ended without a deal. And all this while the violence continued. Al Jazeera reported over 80 Palestinians killed across Gaza just as those talks were getting underway.
That contrast is just brutal. Negotiation attempts while the death toll climbs.
And the human cost is staggering, we have to emphasize that. Al Jazeera highlighted this heartbreaking case of the 3-year-old toddler, Amr al-Hams, in southern Gaza. Shrapnel in his brain from an Israeli airstrike. His mother and family killed.
Oh, that's horrific. Just unimaginable. These aren't just statistics.
Not at all. They're individual tragedies that show the immediate, brutal reality for civilians caught in the crossfire.
And beyond Gaza, what about the occupied West Bank? Things seem tense there, too.
Very much so. The Japan Times described the town of Sinjil, west of the Jordan River, as feeling like a big prison because of this huge 5-meter-high metal fence surrounding it. It really illustrates how physical barriers are increasingly defining life for Palestinians.
Restricting movement, access, everything.
And adding to that, Al Jazeera and Reuters report Israel is demolishing homes in the West Bank at the highest rate in over 50 years. Over 100 homes gone already. Think about the displacement, the instability.
Yeah, devastating. And there were issues with aid delivery in Gaza, too.
Grave concerns, yes. The Washington Post reported on alleged flaws in aid projects leading to Palestinians being shot. It highlights the incredible risks, the dangers involved in trying to get humanitarian aid into such intense conflict zones. It points to bigger systemic problems.
Okay, let's shift slightly to Iran's position, both domestically and regionally. What's happening there?
Well, domestically, Al Jazeera reported an intensification of deportations of Afghan refugees. Hundreds of thousands forced to leave. The UN is concerned.
Why the crackdown now?
It seems linked to internal security measures, these so-called spy hunts, following attacks that Iran attributes to Israel. So it's a mix of border control and heightened security fears spilling over into a humanitarian crisis.
And on the diplomatic front, particularly regarding nuclear ambitions.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian gave an interview, reported by RT. He accused Israeli PM Netanyahu of systematically misleading U.S. presidents for decades about Iran's intent to build nuclear weapons.
Pezeshkian insists they aren't building them.
He insists they are not, citing a religious decree, and he says confirmations from the IAEA, the International Nuclear Watchdog, which has inspectors there.
Okay, and dialogue with the U.S.
Pezeshkian said Iran is open to dialogue after the conflict with Israel. But he also criticized Israel for alleged sabotage, specifically mentioning a June 13th strike on nuclear and military facilities, claiming it derailed diplomatic talks that were just starting.
So deep distrust, where any perceived hostile act can just derail fragile diplomacy.
Exactly. It paints a picture of just how difficult any path towards de-escalation remains in that region. Very fragile.
All right, let's move our focus to Eastern Europe. The war in Ukraine continues, obviously shaping the European security landscape, but there seem to be significant internal issues within Ukraine too, right? And debates about Western support.
Yes, definitely. There are some serious allegations coming from within Ukraine. RT reported on claims by Ukrainian MP Anna Skorokhod regarding corruption in the military.
What kind of corruption?
She alleges commanders are fraudulently registering soldiers for combat pay, which the officers then apparently seize. Skimming funds, essentially.
Wow. And she mentions soldiers being used for personal labor, like building houses.
That's the allegation, devoting personnel from combat duties for private gain. Skorokhod claims this has led to a shocking number, over 213,000 unauthorized military abandonments. Soldiers going AWOL because they feel they have no way to address these abuses.
That's a staggering number. If true, it points to a massive morale problem.
A huge problem. And it's compounded by budget issues. The deputy chair of the Parliamentary Finance Committee noted a nearly $10 billion shortfall in defense funding. This financial pressure, plus the alleged exploitation, makes their forced mobilization campaign incredibly difficult.
And adding to the difficulties, Ukraine decided to withdraw from the mine ban treaty.
Yes, Reuters reported that. A tough decision driven by battlefield setbacks. But it raises serious humanitarian concerns given how many mines now litter the country, posing long-term risks.
Such brutal realities. And what about that Western support? You mentioned debates.
Right. Politico reported on a UK-French idea, potentially deploying Western troops to Ukraine after a truce with Russia. But it's hitting major roadblocks.
Lack of U.S. support. Disagreements between London and Paris.
Both. The U.S. isn't backing it, and there seems to be friction. French officials reportedly criticized the UK for relying too much on Washington, while UK officials apparently think Macron is more concerned about his legacy. Strategic divisions within NATO becoming visible.
And Russia's stance.
Predictably strong opposition. RT reported Russia warned it wouldn't tolerate any Western military presence. It signals a potential major escalation point if that ever happened. Shows how fractured alliances can be in a crisis.
Speaking of alliances, NATO's own spending is a big topic, especially the financial side.
Absolutely. Danish economy minister Stephanie Lose warned that these rapid defense spending increases could actually jeopardize financial stability across the EU. Denmark is, up there in Scandinavia.
Because NATO raised its target significantly, right?
Yeah.
From 2% to 5% of GDP.
Exactly, with 3.5% specifically for military purposes, plus the EU's massive $800 billion Rearm Europe initiative. Many countries, including Denmark, are using escape clauses to bypass normal budget rules to fund this.
And the justification is the threat from Russia.
That's the narrative from European NATO members, yes.
Yeah.
They see it as essential spending for collective security against a growing immediate threat.
But Russia naturally sees it differently.
Completely differently. Foreign Minister Lavrov, speaking to a Hungarian newspaper, accused the West of using the Russian threat narrative as a distraction from their own domestic problems. Inflation, unemployment, falling living standards, crime.
He argues the threat is exaggerated.
He does. And he insists NATO's long-term efforts to turn Ukraine into a strategic stronghold against Russia posed a direct existential threat, leaving Moscow, in his view, No alternative but military action.
It's a starkly different perspective.
And it's echoed by others, like Brazil's President Lula, who criticized NATO for fueling a global arms race, arguing it promotes conflict, not peace. A clear geopolitical divide on security and spending drivers.
Okay, inside Russia itself, there have been some dramatic events, shakeups.
Yes, quite startling. President Putin dismissed Roman Starovoyt as transport minister. Then, just hours later, Starovoyt was found dead. Gunshot wound in a car near Moscow.
And the leading theory is suicide.
That's what RT and Politico reported. His death comes right in the middle of this unfolding corruption scandal in the Kursk region, bordering Ukraine, where he used to be governor. It's linked to misappropriated defense funds. Over 20 arrests already.
Grim. It hints at the high stakes and, well, the opacity of power dynamics there.
Definitely leaves many questions unanswered. But amidst this, Russia is promoting new military tech, a system called Oreshnik.
Described as a non-nuclear deterrent.
Yes. RT discussed it after a reported precise strike on Ukraine's Yuzhmash defense facility. It's apparently capable of speeds over Mach 10, surviving re-entry heat, and accurately hitting fortified targets underground with minimal surface disruption.
Underground detonation, so hitting bunkers effectively.
Precisely. And it's reportedly in serial production, scheduled for deployment in Belarus, north of Ukraine, by late 2025. That puts a large part of Europe in range.
The significance there.
Well, the key insight is how this technology blurs the line between conventional and potentially strategic, devastating strikes. It could lower the threshold for escalation because conventional attacks become much harder to defend against, forcing a rethink of response doctrines.
Right. Okay, moving slightly south. There's friction between Russia and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan being that South Caucasus region, bridging Europe and Asia.
Yes, diplomatic friction. The Kremlin is working to get Russian citizens released who were detained in Baku, Azerbaijan's capital. This includes journalists from Sputnik, Azerbaijan.
What sparked the detentions?
It seems to follow a controversial Russian police operation in Russia, targeting an alleged crime group of Russian citizens of Azerbaijani descent. That operation led to deaths and allegations of abuse. Moscow sees Baku's actions, including raiding Sputnik's office, as retaliation.
So, domestic law enforcement spilling into international diplomacy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Russia's foreign ministry condemned the detentions as unlawful. It underscores rising tensions, despite both sides saying they want to resolve things. Shows how quickly things can escalate between historically linked nations.
Okay, let's zoom out now to the bigger picture. Global power shifts and trade wars. Specifically, the dynamic between the expanding BRICS bloc and the U.S. This feels like a major realignment story.
It really is. The 17th BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, was a big moment. You have the original members Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus new additions like Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia, the UAE, Indonesia.
That's a huge collective. What does it represent now?
Nearly half the world's population and around 40% of global GDP. And crucially, President Putin highlighted that based on purchasing power parity, which adjusts for cost differences, giving a better economic size comparison, BRICS collective GDP now surpasses the G7's.
Wow. That's a significant symbolic and practical milestone, or a real shift in the economic balance.
Absolutely. And they're using that collective weight. Al Jazeera reported they jointly condemned attacks on Iran, the Gaza war, and Trump's tariffs. They're emphasizing diplomacy, aiming to promote stability, positioning themselves as a more active force.
So asserting themselves on the world stage more.
Definitely. South Africa's President Ramaphosa urged BRICS to take a more assertive role, mediating conflicts Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, Dakar, Congo. And Bolivia's President Arce went further, criticizing the U.S. and EU for provoking conflicts to preserve a fading unipolar order, framing BRICS as the force for a multipolar, equitable system.
A clear counter-narrative to Western leadership.
A very clear one, ideologically and economically. And you see it in trade flows, too. RT reported Russia's fertilizer exports to BRICS nations surged over 60% in 3 years, shifting away from the EU due to sanctions and tensions.
And Brazil, a huge agricultural player, is now getting a quarter of Russia's fertilizer exports. That's a tangible realignment.
It is. Which brings us neatly to former President Trump's tariff offensive. He's directly targeting BRICS, threatening an extra 10% tariff on countries engaging with the bloc, accusing them of anti-American policies.
And he repeated that line about BRICS being dead if it undermines the dollar, still focused on currency dominance.
Very much so. And it's not just BRICS. CNBC and Reuters noted he also plans a 25% tax on goods from South Korea and Japan starting August 1st. South Korea on the Korean Peninsula, Japan, the island nation in East Asia.
Market reaction. Jittery, I assume.
Stock futures fell, dollar strengthened. Markets hate that kind of uncertainty over major trade relationships.
And the impact is already being felt, like in India.
Yes, Al Jazeera highlighted Indian foundries facing dire consequences from increased tariffs on steel and aluminum, up to 50% since June 4th. Described as a nail in the coffin for those exports. Real economic pain.
But India seems to be pushing back, negotiating.
According to RT, yes. Their commerce minister said India is negotiating a bilateral trade deal with the U.S. from a position of strength, not rushing. They want better market access for their goods, but are protecting sensitive sectors like agriculture. It's a high-stakes negotiation. And, related to resources and supply chains, China is making big moves, aggressively acquiring overseas mines.
Why this just now?
To secure key minerals as Western countries restrict Chinese investment in their own resources. The Financial Times reported 10 major Chinese mining deals, over $100 million each in 2023, the most since 2013, a very strategic push.
Where are they investing?
All over. Gold in Kazakhstan and Central Asia, Ghana and Ivory Coast in West Africa, copper in Zambia and Southern Africa, copper gold in Brazil, a big stake in a rare earth project in Tanzania, East Africa.
And China already dominates rare earth refining, right?
Hugely, around 90% globally. So this is about securing the raw materials upstream. It's driven by that strategic ambition to control critical minerals, as the U.S. and Canada, for example, limit Chinese access domestically. It underscores this geopolitical tug of war for resources essential for tech, energy, defense, everything.
Okay, let's bring it back home now to the U.S. domestic scene. It feels like a real whirlwind of political polarization, social strain, and sadly, devastating natural disasters lately.
It certainly does. And that clash between former President Trump and Elon Musk kind of encapsulates the political weirdness and shifting sands.
Musk publicly split from Trump?
Yeah.
Over the deficit?
Yeah, RT reported Musk cited concerns about the national budget deficit jumping from $2 trillion under Biden to a projected $2.5 trillion under Trump's new spending bill. That seemed to be the trigger.
And he resigned from that government efficiency role, DOGE.
He did. Then, quite dramatically, on July 4th, he announced the America Party, pitched as a centrist alternative for people fed up at the extremes, targeting key seats in the 2026 midterms. He even compared his strategy to an ancient Greek general.
Very Musk-like, grandiose and unconventional. And Trump's reaction.
Predictably fiery. RT and DW reported Trump called Musk a train wreck, ridiculous, accusing him of sowing disruption and chaos. Trump doubts third parties can succeed, says they just divide voters. He also threw in allegations about Musk wanting a Democrat to run NASA and benefiting from subsidies.
So a real falling out between former allies. But it taps into something bigger, doesn't it?
It does. You have figures like Steve Bannon comparing Trump to Washington and Lincoln, even hinting at a third term despite the Constitution. That kind of rhetoric fuels the polarization.
And that poll showing 40% of Americans think a civil war is possible in the next decade. That's sobering.
It's a truly striking statistic from YouGov, highlighted by RT. It reflects incredibly deep partisan and racial divides, a real anxiety about the country's future. Chilling, really.
Moving to immigration. Always a contentious issue. There was a setback for that Texas law, SB 4, Texas being the large southern state bordering Mexico.
Yes, a significant one. News America has now reported the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld an injunction blocking SB 4.
That was the law trying to let state officers handle deportations and criminalize undocumented migrants.
Exactly. But the court emphasized immigration is federal power, citing the Constitution's Supremacy Clause. So states can't just make their own immigration enforcement laws like that. A big win for immigrant rights groups.
But on the federal level, deportations continue, sometimes controversially.
Yes. RT reported the U.S. deported 8 individuals, described by DHS as barbaric criminal illegal aliens convicted of serious crimes, to South Sudan. That's an East African nation facing severe instability. Their home countries apparently refused them.
And this happened on July 4th, as part of reinstated hardline measures.
Correct. Part of a broader return to stricter measures under President Trump, including fast-track deportations.
But there was some positive news for Haitian immigrants.
Yes, a contrasting development. A U.S. district judge blocked the Trump administration's attempt to shorten temporary protected status, TPS, for Haitians. Haiti, the Caribbean nation. Protections are preserved through February 2026. Hailed as a milestone against systemic racism in policy by advocates. Shows the ongoing legal battles and varied outcomes.
Beyond politics, what about socioeconomic challenges? Food insecurity seems to be worsening dramatically.
It really is. Axios reported, based on Morning Consult data, that food insecurity among U.S. adults has nearly doubled since 2021. It's now affecting 15.6% of the population.
Doubled. That's a huge jump. Why?
RT detailed how it follows deep cuts to federal food aid, especially SNAP. That legislation Trump signed cut $230 billion from SNAP over a decade. A vital safety net weakened.
And food banks are seeing the impact directly.
Massively. Philadelphia's Share Food program, for example. Philly, being in Pennsylvania, saw demand jump 120% in 3 years. A stark indicator of household economic strain, despite any broader recovery narratives.
And it's not just food. Children's health is also declining.
According to a new study reported by AP News. Yes. American kids have faced a decline in health over the past 2 decades. Increasing unhealthiness, concerning trends in well-being, points to systemic public health issues.
And finally, we have to touch on those catastrophic floods in Texas. Just devastating news.
Truly awful. The death toll, according to Al Jazeera, is at least 82, with dozens still missing. And the tragedy at Camp Mystic, that girls' summer camp. At least 28 children among the casualties. 10 girls and a counselor still unaccounted for.
Horrific. The camp itself just ripped apart. Were there warnings?
There were. The BBC reported a flash flood warning early Friday morning, then an emergency warning, then another river warning. But questions are being raised about adequacy and timeliness, given how fast it happened and the known risk.
Known risk. The camp was in a flood-prone area.
CNN reported both campsites overlap with either the floodway or areas with a known annual chance of flooding. The risk was identified. The devastation highlights the challenge of preparedness, even when risks are known.
And those time-lapse videos are just terrifying, showing roads disappearing in minutes.
They really emphasize the destructive force. And meanwhile, AP News notes Tropical Depression Chantal is causing flood concerns up the East Coast in North Carolina and Virginia. It all underscores the increasing severity of extreme weather and the urgent need for better resilience and adaptation.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Moving away from the geopolitical storms and disasters, let's look at human ingenuity, science, and technology frontiers, where progress is often, well, quite amazing.
Absolutely. And we start with something profound in biology, a genuinely significant breakthrough.
What's this?
Scientists at the University of Virginia and the NIH have discovered a previously unknown organelle inside our cells. They've named it the hemifusum.
An organelle, like the mitochondria or nucleus, a new tiny structure within the cell.
Exactly. And finding a new one is huge. The last one was identified over 50 years ago. Popular Mechanics covered this. It's like finding a new internal component we never knew we had.
Wow, what does it do?
It's involved in cellular recycling. It regulates autophagy, the body's way of cleaning out damaged cells. Specifically, it seems to gather up misfolded proteins when cells are stressed, like by heat, getting them ready for disposal. A cellular quality control manager, maybe?
The implications could be massive, right, for understanding diseases.
Immense. For basic cell biology, but also potentially for new treatments for genetic diseases where protein misfolding is an issue. It opens up entirely new research avenues into cell health. It's a reminder of how much we still don't know about ourselves at the most basic level.
Incredible. And AI is also unlocking secrets, but from the distant past.
Get this. Popular Mechanics also reported on reconstructing a Babylonian hymn, lost for over 1,000 years. Babylonia, ancient Mesopotamia, modern Iraq.
How did they do that?
Using sophisticated AI models to interpret hundreds of fragmented cuneiform tablets from a library in Baghdad, Iraq's capital. The AI pieced together not just lyrics, but potentially the musical notation, too.
So we might know what ancient Babylonian music sounded like. That's wild.
It gives us a unique glimpse, shows AI's power in interpreting historical artifacts, bringing lost culture back to life.
Amazing. But AI is also being used for very modern problems, like cybercrime.
Definitely. The Japan Times reported Visa has invested $12 billion over 5 years into its 247 war room, developing AI tools to improve cyber fraud detection across billions of transactions. A huge investment in AI for security.
And it's shaking up industries, too. The data industry.
Yes, TechCrunch noted AI is forcing consolidation, especially among software-as-a-service SaaS companies. The pace of AI adoption means companies need scale and advanced capabilities, leading to mergers and acquisitions.
Makes sense. What about AI on the roads? Robo-taxis?
They're expanding their testing grounds. TechCrunch reported Waymo is now testing in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and New York City. Not a commercial launch yet, but shows intent to move into northeastern U.S. cities. The future is inching closer.
And in the social media world, Threads is gaining on X.
Significantly, TechCrunch cited data showing Threads hit 115 million daily active mobile users in June, up almost 128% year over year. X was at 132 million, but its growth declined 15%, a real potential shift in user engagement.
Interesting times for social media, and tech giants are still facing regulatory heat. Apple in the EU.
Oh yes, Apple is appealing a huge 500 million EU fine. The EU alleges Apple violated the Digital Markets Act by restricting developers from telling users about cheaper purchase options outside the App Store. Ongoing battles over platform power.
And cybersecurity remains a constant threat. That Ingram Micro outage.
Yes, TechCrunch reported Ingram Micro, a major IT distributor, suffered a ransomware attack causing significant ongoing disruptions. A stark reminder of the vulnerabilities businesses face.
Finally, up in space, what are Hubble and Webb showing us?
NASA reported a stunning collaboration between the two telescopes. They produced this incredibly detailed image of two star clusters, NGC 460 and 456, and the small Magellanic Cloud that's a dwarf galaxy orbiting our Milky Way.
Combining their strengths, visible and infrared light.
Exactly. It reveals different aspects of this stellar nursery, showing active star formation. It gives insights into how galaxies interact and form stars in environments with fewer heavy elements like the early universe. Just magnificent science and imagery helping us understand our cosmic neighborhood.
From the cosmic scale back down to Earth, let's talk environment and climate resilience. Our planet is definitely making itself felt.
For sure. Wildfires are a major concern globally, especially with these intense heat waves. Al Jazeera and DW reported fires across the Mediterranean affecting France and Western Europe, Greece in Southern Europe, Turkey bridging Europe and Asia, and Syria in the Middle East.
France saw evacuations, temperatures over 40 Celsius.
Yes, in the Corbières region. And Germany wasn't spared either. Its eastern states, particularly Thuringia, had their biggest wildfire in decades, though firefighters got it under control. It highlights the growing frequency and intensity of fires linked to climate change.
And in the UK, a potential water crisis looming.
A stark warning, yes. RT reported the Environment Minister, Steve Reed, said the UK is on the verge of water rationing. He blamed years of mismanagement and underinvestment in infrastructure leaks, inefficiencies.
It's not just heat waves, but increased demand too. From data centers, battery plants.
That's part of it, straining existing supplies. Reed acknowledged that even with $104 billion, about $136 billion allocated for upgrades like new reservoirs and fixing leaks, reversing decades of neglect takes time. More than 5 years, he said.
And that this isn't unique to the UK.
Not at all. It mirrors challenges elsewhere. Spain and Southern Europe, Australia down under too, they already have strict water use policies. A global wake-up call about managing this vital resource, needing both infrastructure and planning.
Then there's Brazil, facing drought but welcoming AI data centers. That sounds like a paradox.
It is an interesting one, highlighted by Al Jazeera. Brazil, the large South American nation, wants the economic benefits and digital service growth from these data centers, aiming for sustainable investments despite water scarcity.
But data centers use massive amounts of water for cooling, right? Environmentalists must be concerned.
Deeply concerned. It raises that difficult question. Prioritizing short-term economic gain versus long-term environmental sustainability, especially in a water-stressed region, a trade-off many nations face.
On a more proactive note, Denmark is pushing the EU on its green agenda.
Yes, DW reported on Denmark's efforts. As a pioneer in renewables and green agriculture, they're advocating strongly for the EU to maintain, even accelerate, its environmental commitments despite economic pressures, emphasizing collective action. Their leadership is pretty crucial for the EU's overall goals.
All right, let's pivot to health, justice, and some broader social issues shaping communities around the world. Some progress, some persistent challenges.
Starting with a positive step in health policy in the UK, the BBC reported the government plans to extend bereavement leave for parents who experience miscarriage before 24 weeks.
That feels like an important and compassionate change, recognizing that loss.
It does, providing support and time for grief, acknowledging the emotional impact.
On the other hand, public health in the U.S. has seen a setback. Measles.
Yes, a concerning one. The Washington Post reported a surge in measles cases, hitting a 33-year high. Outbreaks are spreading. It's a setback for a vaccine-preventable disease, highlighting gaps in vaccination coverage.
Right. Now, turning to justice and accountability, that seems to be a recurring theme, the post office scandal in the UK.
Still resonating strongly. The BBC featured a victim who, despite having his conviction overturned and a law passed to exonerate people, stressed the ongoing need for accountability. Holding those responsible to account, beyond just clearing names, the emotional toll remains immense.
And that truly disturbing mushroom murder trial in Australia. Australia, the country in Oceania.
Chilling story. Al Jazeera and the BBC reported Aaron Patterson was found guilty of murdering 3 relatives and trying to kill another using death cap mushrooms and beef Wellingtons back in 2023. Evidence suggested she hunted the mushrooms and lured the victims. Just horrific.
There are other serious crime reports, too.
Yes, several. The BBC reported a paramedic jailed for over 10 years for secretly giving a pregnant woman an abortion drug, leading to the unborn child's death, a profound breach of trust.
And soldiers sacked for sharing footage.
Yahoo News reported 2 British Army soldiers dismissed for sharing helmet cam footage from October 7th showing deceased civilians. Raises questions about military conduct, handling sensitive imagery.
Also a murder charge in Scotland? And an incident at a U.S. border facility.
Yes, the BBC reported a man charged with murdering scientist Dr. Fortune Gomo in Dundee, Scotland. And CNN and the BBC covered an incident in Texas where a Border Patrol officer was shot and a man with a rifle was killed in an exchange of fire. These individual cases paint a broader picture of ongoing public safety challenges.
Finally, what about animal welfare stories? Often quite revealing.
Sadly, a heartbreaking one from Italy in southern Europe. The BBC shared that a celebrated hero sniffer dog, known for finding earthquake survivors, was killed after being fed sausages filled with nails. Just a despicable act causing widespread outrage.
Awful. And lions kept as pets in Pakistan.
DW reported authorities in Pakistan's Punjab region seized 18 lions kept illegally as pets. Highlights issues of wildlife trafficking and exotic pets in South Asia.
And a tourist leaving a dog in a hot locker.
Yahoo News reported that, allegedly left her dog in a locker while exploring a castle. Police got involved. These stories, sadly, remind us of our responsibilities towards animals and the varying global challenges in protecting them.
Okay, let's shift the tone a bit now. Let's dive into sports, culture, and some of those curious corners of human nature. Life goes on, right? Competition, shared experiences.
Absolutely. Starting with some big moves in U.S. sports, the New York Times reported Kevin Durant's trade to the Houston Rockets is official. Part of a massive 7-team deal, an NBA record apparently, shakes things up.
Yeah, big news for basketball fans. And baseball had its all-star roster reveal.
It did. MLB.com covered the live reveal on ESPN. Lots of young talent, first-timers getting the nod. Always a fun mid-season highlight.
Wimbledon, though, seemed to have some tech drama. The electronic line calling.
Oh, definitely. The BBC reported organizers had to apologize because the system on center court in London was turned off by mistake. It missed 3 crucial calls. They called it human error, which is, ironic for a system meant to eliminate that.
You really can't make this stuff up. An AI system failing due to human error turning it off. Players must have been thrilled.
Not exactly. Emma Raducanu and Jack Draper were quite critical after glitches in their matches. Wimbledon actually announced changes to the system right away because of the controversy. An umpire even took a rest day after one incident. Shows the pressure these glitches cause.
Technology causing more problems than it solves sometimes, especially under pressure.
It seems that way. Elsewhere in sport, the BBC noted England's cricket team is struggling, frustrating fans. But Cameron Norrie was the last Brit standing in Wimbledon singles, and Novak Djokovic showed his usual grit, reaching the quarterfinals again.
What about football? U.S. team.
Questions being asked about Coach Pochettino after their Gold Cup loss to Mexico. And in rugby, Maro Itoje is set to face the Brumbies. But maybe the most remarkable feat. The BBC reported on 15-year-old Oscar Black becoming the youngest person to swim solo from Northern Ireland to Scotland, the North Channel Swim. Took him 16 hours and 38 minutes.
15 years old. That's incredible endurance.
Wow, yeah. Truly astounding. And quick football updates. Al Jazeera and the BBC mentioned Chelsea beat Palmeiras to reach the Club World Cup semis. Arsenal reportedly closing in on signing forward Victor Gyökeres. Busy transfer window.
Moving beyond sport, let's touch on culture and societal reflections. London marked the 20th anniversary of the 77 bombings.
Yes, a solemn commemoration at St. Paul's Cathedral. Prince William laid flowers, King Charles sent a message of unity, a reminder of enduring impact and communal healing, covered by the BBC.
And tributes for notable figures who passed away.
Yes. News America's now reported tributes for Ricky Singh, the iconic Caribbean journalist known for fearless reporting and promoting regional unity, who died at 88. And the Japan Times noted the passing of Yoshiomi Tamai, 90, founder of the Ashinaga Foundation, which supported over 110,000 orphan students. Incredible legacies.
Then there's that growing anti-tourism backlash in places like Mallorca, the Spanish island.
Yeah, RT reported intensified sentiment there. Vandalism against properties linked to foreign tourists, especially Germans. Locals feel overwhelmed, rising rents, housing prices, changing communities due to mass tourism.
Authorities are trying to respond, banning new hotels.
Measures like that, yes.
Huh.
Restricting beach access, too. It's not just Majorca. Similar protests in Barcelona, Venice, Lisbon highlights this real tension between tourism economies and the impact on local life, pushing questions about sustainability.
From modern tensions to preserving tradition, log rafting in Japan.
An interesting one from the Japan Times. In Wakayama, Japan, log rafting, once used for timber transport, is now a popular tourist attraction. A blend of history, culture, and nature.
And festivals, Pamplona's Bull Run.
It opened again in Spain, drawing huge crowds, according to Al Jazeera and AP News. That tradition continues, along with the controversy. And Sean Diddy Combs apparently got a standing ovation from inmates after a court victory. A strange side note.
Definitely strange. What about other societal stories? Activism, authors, reality TV?
A mix. Yahoo News mentioned an anti-woke activist praising the New York Times for revealing details about a politician's college application, highlighting that messy intersection of activism, privacy, journalism. The BBC reported author Raynor Winn defending her bestseller against claims of fabrication, sparking debate about memoir versus fiction. And reality TV drama. Love Island. A contestant, Sierra Ortega, left Love Island USA after a racism controversy, sparking wider conversations. Al Jazeera also featured Vietnamese immigrants in Germany sharing their hopes and challenges, a poignant look at the immigrant experience. These stories touch on identity, truth, representation, aspiration.
And a quirky workplace story to finish, sideburns at In, at Out.
SF Chait reported a former employee suing for $3 million, claims wrongful termination for refusing to shave his sideburns, raises questions about appearance policies and potential discrimination. Definitely a unique one.
And finally, a musical farewell, Ozzy and Black Sabbath.
Yes. The New York Times reported their final shows were played in Birmingham, England, the end of an era for a truly iconic, influential band. Bittersweet for rock history.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground today. From those incredibly complex geopolitical shifts, the conflicts, the new military tech reshaping things,
to the very real personal impact of disasters like the Texas floods and those underlying socioeconomic strains like food poverty in the U.S., it really does paint a complex picture.
And then the flip side, those amazing scientific leaps, like finding a whole new part of our cells, the hemifusum, or AI bringing ancient music back to life.
Plus the tech evolution, robotaxis inching forward, social media dynamics shifting, alongside those critical environmental challenges like wildfires and water scarcity that affect us all. Every story connects, somehow.
It really is an interconnected web. So after weaving all these threads together, what's the final thought? What does it mean for us trying to make sense of it all?
Well, if you connect all these dots, what really stands out, I think, is just how quickly global issues now cascade across borders. Trade policies, environmental changes, international relations, even domestic politics. The ripple effects are profound and fast. They hit individual lives, shape national policies, shift global alliances. It underscores just how deeply interconnected our world is now.
Yeah.
So maybe the question for you, our listener, the informed global citizen, is this. In a world where information travels instantly and impacts are felt globally, how can you best use this understanding? How can you navigate this complexity to foster maybe greater understanding, resilience, and perhaps positive change, even in your own sphere?
That's a great question to ponder. Keep digging deeper, everyone. Keep questioning. Keep seeking diverse perspectives on the things that matter to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really appreciate you listening. We'll be back soon with more insights right here on The Deep Dive.